Hey, welcome to Morning Scone. Glad to have you with us on this Monday morning edition. Weird day a little bit because obviously there was no local sports yesterday. The NFL draft is over. LSU Baseball, their series ended on Saturday. Really, the Pelicans and the Warriors are off until Tuesday. So I could break down Billy Horschel, his team winning the Zurich Classic, or I figured what I would do is answer a question that I got asked the most this weekend, and that is, what does LSU baseball have to do to host a regional? Because I've talked about this a good bit about how that's still a possibility even after the weekend loss this weekend at Ole Miss. Now, losing Sunday or Saturday at Ole Miss Game 3, LSU missed an enormous opportunity, which we'll get into a little bit. There was one other news note from the weekend, and that's that LSU football got a commit that I want to talk about in just a second. But what I've been kind of bullish on, and Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball kind of changed my target on this, is LSU getting to 17 conference wins. And if you get to 17 conference wins, they're almost going to be assured hosting a regional. Nothing's ever a sure thing because obviously every committee is different, and some committees may value winning late. Some committees may value conference record. Some committees may just be really biased toward a certain team, and they're going to fabricate their argument that given year based on the team they believe belongs in. RPI is always something people talk about. But I had always just sort of had 18 conference wins as my target. And Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball, who's one of the most respected college baseball writers in the country, said you could probably lower that to 17 for this LSU team. If they get to 17 wins, they're probably going to be in, just because of the strength of the SEC this year, meaning hosting a regional. So just for a little context and perspective, a season ago, 2017, LSU had the SEC had 4 regional hosts and 2 national seeds. LSU, of course, was one of them. Mississippi State was the team that got left out of hosting on the bubble. They had 17 conference wins, but they also lost on Friday of the SEC tournament, so they didn't play into the weekend. And if you remember, of course, LSU went to Starkville and swept Mississippi State in the final weekend of the regular season. So, although Mississippi State was at 17 wins, they were swept at home in their final weekend series. They played 2 games they won 2 games in Hoover and then did not play into the weekend. They lost on Friday. And they were sitting there at 17 wins, and other teams got hot. So that's part of it as well, is what other teams in the country do. So what I've kind of laid out is, and I'll give you a for instance of a team that last year that countered that could be like LSU's approach this year. So that's why LSU losing on Saturday to Ole Miss is significant, because if they take 2 at home this weekend against Arkansas, which is doable, Arkansas is very good, but they've really struggled on the road this year. If they sweep Bama, which is doable because Bama's not very good at all, and if they take 2 at Auburn, which is going to be tough because it's going to be almost impossible to beat Casey Mize on Friday night, or Thursday be the first game of that series. That's 7 conference wins that get you to 17. Now, had you won against Ole Miss on Saturday and not blown that lead, you could even go back and talk about the Game 3 against South Carolina that you blew. But neither here nor there. The ones that I mentioned would get you to 17. So I would look at Florida State from a year ago as a test case. So Florida State lost 22 games last year. They were 14-14 in the ACC. It was the first year ever since the ACC was founded that Florida State did not have a winning record in the ACC. They were 14-14, but they got hot at the end of the regular season. They won the ACC tournament, and in so doing, their RPI climbed up to 8th. They climbed up to a top 10 RPI despite being 14-14 in their conference. And not only did they host, but they were the 12th overall seed. So there were actually 4 regional host sites lower than Florida State at 14-14 in the league. So if you look at LSU and you look at sort of the counter to Mississippi State a year ago, Florida State played very well late, won their conference tournament. Mississippi State had a nice resume, but got swept at home in the last regular season weekend, and then didn't play into the weekend at the SEC tournament in Hoover. So if if LSU goes on the run we're talking about here, where they win 2 against Arkansas, which, by the way, has an RPI of 5, if they're able to sweep Bama, which has an RPI of 68, and they're terrible, and it's totally doable. Both those series are in Baton Rouge. And you go on the road and you take 2 from Auburn, which, by the way, in spite of some of their struggles, Auburn's RPI is 6. So LSU's RPI presently is 53, and I know this is a lot of numbers, but people ask the question, so I figured I'd go deep dive here. LSU's RPI is 53 right now. That's according to Warren Nolan as of Monday morning. You have 2 weekend series remaining, so 6 more games. That's before the SEC tournament against teams in the top 10 of the RPI. So that 53, if LSU takes care of business and just playing those games, is going to drastically elevate LSU's RPI, just like it happened with Florida State a year ago. You play well late, your RPI is going to increase, you're going to get the committee's attention. The other thing that I'm curious is how much attention will the committee pay to LSU's injuries? And it's common in basketball that injuries will impact a committee seating, and I would not be surprised at all if LSU goes on this run, especially given that they're LSU, and they finish 17-13 in the SEC, and then play into the weekend in Hoover, and that's key. You can't go to Hoover and get bounced. But LSU's teams, Pulmonary, have been very good at the SEC tournament in the past, and I would not be surprised at all if LSU played into the weekend in Hoover. Now, if they ran into Florida or had an unfavorable matchup like that where they had to go against Brady Singer or something, that would be terrible. But it's certainly doable for this LSU team to get the 17 conference wins, play into the weekend at the SEC tournament, and then put their resume, have their RPI creep in certainly into the top 15, and then put their resume before the committee and say, what do you think? So they got a lot of work to do. I'm not saying that it's a slam dunk sure thing, and as inconsistent as this team has been, the 7 conference wins that I keep talking about, 2 against Arkansas, 3 against Bama, 2 against Auburn, that's hardly a certainty for this team at this point. But it's doable. It's very realistic. So as unfortunate as going 1-5 in your last 6 SEC games is, they were on the road against good teams, one of them with a top 5 RPI or the a top 10 RPI with Ole Miss. So it's just an opportunity for LSU right now to look at their goal that's still in play. You forget about a national seed at this point, and you recognize that a regional host site is still in play, but you got to play better. So we'll see what happens with Josh Smith this week. As he did not play in Game 3 against Ole Miss because his back was acting up on him. And something else to keep in mind is that the committees typically show a lot of respect to the SEC. And I know LSU fans bring up 2011 when LSU had an RPI of 24 and was left out of the field entirely. But that's when the SEC changed its rules about the SEC tournament. They allowed more teams in to prevent that type of scenario. But go back to 2016. The SEC got 4 national seeds and 7 host sites. Ole Miss was 18-12 and got a host site. So half of the national seeds came from the SEC. The committee respects the SEC, and that weighs in LSU's favor again. I'm not trying to be super duper homer guy. What I'm doing is just explaining how, and I'm not predicting that this will happen, but what I'm saying is there is a method that this can happen for LSU and a blueprint for them to get a regional host site. So don't be entirely stunned if it happens that way. One other quick note before we wrap this up. LSU football got a commit on Sunday from Marcel Brooks. He's a linebacker out of Texas, a 6'3", 200-pounder, and he picked LSU over Alabama. 2 reasons why that's significant. And again, I'm not a recruiting guru. I've never seen Marcel Brooks play before yesterday. If you'd asked me who that was, I would have had no idea. But 2 reasons why it's significant. Number 1, he picked LSU over Alabama. So anytime LSU wins a recruiting battle against Nick Saban, that's a big win. So sweet. The other is obviously you're losing Devin White. You're going to lose Devin White to the draft. So if you're going to need a major blue chip thumper type prospect that can go be the guy in the middle of your defense to come after this crop of the guys right now that really look like they're ascending, like Phillips and Queen and Tyler Taylor at the end of last year when you really recruited a nice crop of linebackers. So Marcel Brooks commits to LSU. Let's see if they can keep him in the boat between now and the December early signing period. All right, that's going to do it for this Monday edition of Morning Scone. Please hit the red subscribe button. As always, I appreciate you watching. The red subscribe button is like right down there. If you don't see it, if you got linked here somewhere else, then tap my name, the hyperlink. It'll bring you to the Matt Scone YouTube channel, and then you can subscribe there. So appreciate y'all. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.